Couple of other forms of speech, and we've been talking about the First Amendment, and we've been talking about things that are legal and that aren't legal, obviously this week in class. Couple of other pieces that I wanted to give you. One is actually going to be commercial speech, and two is actually going to be qualified speech. The rules for commercial speech are a little bit different than just regular speech. And if you remember, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law, and in theory, no means no. Well, at this point, I think we've established that no doesn't always mean no, and sometimes it depends on the issue, sometimes it depends on which of the 5 freedoms we're actually talking about within the First Amendment. But for commercial speech, and when you talk about commercial speech, we could be talking about a commercial that they would play during the Super Bowl. We could be talking about an ad in a newspaper. We could be talking about a billboard that's actually along the side of the road. Commercial speech would cover any of these things. Again, when we're talking about selling a product, we're talking about some form of promotion, these types of things. There's 2 basic rules that will determine if commercial speech is legal. Number 1, what you're actually selling has got to be legal. Number 1, what you're selling has got to be legal. So for example, if you go and you pick up one of the free magazines that are by the metro station or the bus stops, and you start reading about people in there that are attempting to sell weed in an advertisement, or if you hear or see pictures or whatever on the radio that are dealing with a prostitution service, well, these are services that aren't legal. So right there, commercial speech is going to throw this right out the window. This would not be a legal advertisement. Again, what you're selling has got to be legal. So weed is not legal at this point, so that's not going to be allowed. Prostitution in some parts of the country would be legal, but in Maryland, no, that's not going to be allowed. That would be strike 1. Typically, it's not about whether what you're selling is legal, but rather about the ad itself, if it's actually accurate. What you've got to do is you've got to have an accurate representation. You've got to have an accurate portrayal, when you think about it, of what the product is that you're attempting to sell, that you're attempting to move. So when you think about it, the ingredients have got to be accurate. The number of ounces in the can have got to be accurate. When you talk about representations, I mean, the old cigarette ads used to say that cigarettes would make you run faster, that they would make you jump higher, that they would make you more sexually potent. I mean, all of these claims, and in fact, all of these claims have been basically proven as complete lies now, but back in the day, these were accepted as truths. So it's got to be something legal that you're selling, and the ad itself has got to be accurate. Let me give you a good example of this. Crazy Horse Malt Liquor. Now, I've talked to you a little bit about Mount Rushmore this semester. Crazy Horse is also another monument out in South Dakota. And not only are they in the process of building a monument that I believe is going to be about 7 times as large as Mount Rushmore, which means it's probably not going to be done in our lifetime. But they're also building a town based upon maybe one of the most famous Native Americans of all, Crazy Horse. It's going to have a medical school. It's going to have a minor league baseball team. It's going to have a lot of the nice pieces. It's supposed to be, in theory, if this all comes together, a really nice suburbanite Native American town. Not there yet, but that's kind of the plan. Crazy Horse was somebody that was very pacifist. Crazy Horse was also somebody who was non-alcoholic, did not drink alcohol. Well, with Crazy Horse Malt Liquor, there was a company, and I believe they were out of Michigan, and they created Crazy Horse Malt Liquor. Now, the problem with this was that on the can, they had a representation of Crazy Horse. He was on horseback. The horse was up on 2 legs. Crazy Horse had a flaming spear in hand, full headdress, this kind of a thing, so it was a warlike motion, and indeed, Crazy Horse was being represented by name on a malt liquor can. Well, the family of Crazy Horse had a couple of problems. Number 1, they said, you know what? Crazy Horse was pacifist. This is not an accurate portrayal of Crazy Horse the man. Number 2, Crazy Horse was non-alcoholic. This was not an accurate portrayal, putting him on a malt liquor can. So think about this. Under commercial speech, is it legal to sell malt liquor? Well, there's no doubt it's legal to sell malt liquor as long as you're following the state liquor laws. And indeed, you're not selling to people underage. You're not selling outside of the hours that selling is allowed. So there's no problems there. They're actually raising a gripe with the second part, which was the accuracy. Now I want you to think about this. They're basically saying, and these are descendants of the crazy horse, they're saying that our ancestor is being completely misrepresented, number one, because of the way he's portrayed warlike on the can, and number two, because of the fact that he was a non-alcoholic person and his namesake has been put on crazy horse malt liquor. Now, it would seem that if this is true, and these facts were not disputed, that this would violate the accuracy idea. It would seem like that Crazy Horse Malt Liquor, in an attempt maybe to preserve the reputation, the dignity, the memory of their ancestor, this should be struck down. If you want to sell that malt liquor, fine. Just call it something else. Have a different portrayal up there. Maybe even it would be okay if it looked like Crazy Horse, but in fact, the family didn't seem to feel that way. Well, the courts took a look at this. They said, is it legal? Absolutely, it's legal to sell malt liquor. There's no problem there. Is it accurate? Believe it or not, they said yes. They said in this case, it's not based upon the portrayal of the person that's on the can. So even though Crazy Horse was pacifist, even though Crazy Horse was non-alcoholic, did not use or would not have drunk malt liquor, even if it had been around back then, doesn't matter. They said the ingredients on the can that are supposed to be in the beer are accurate. They said that the alcohol percentage is accurate. They said that the ounces in the actual can itself are all accurate. So as such, they said this is not a violation of any commercial speech regulation because it's not about the portrayal of the caricature. It's about the ingredients, the alcohol, and the ounces in the can, and all of this was 100% accurate. So believe it or not, Crazy Horse Malt Liquor is allowed to be sold. The other piece up here is something that's known as qualified speech. And I want to be careful with this because I don't want you to go running around starting fights. But qualified speech. I could come up to you and say, if you weren't holding that camera, I would kick your ass right now. Orlando, you've got the camera. Have I threatened you?
Yeah.
Yeah, why do you say that?
Because you just said you were going to kick my ass.
Because I just said I was going to kick your ass. Well, think about this. Think about the way that this was phrased. If you weren't holding that camera, I would kick your ass. Now, actually, what I did is I gave you a qualified threat or qualified speech. And the idea behind this is, if you really listen to it, I just told you that I wasn't going to do that. If you weren't holding that camera, then I would do it. But note on this, you're actually holding the camera. So effectively what I did is I said, no, I'm not going to do this. Now here's the trick with this. As long as you're holding that camera, I haven't threatened you in any way. That is a qualified threat. But as soon as you put that camera down, think about what I said. If you weren't holding that camera, I would do. Well, understand, when you put that camera down, now the qualification is gone, so now the threat is actually more legitimate. If you're ever going to offer a qualified threat to someone, make sure that you offer a qualified threat that does not change. Because once that qualification goes away, at that point the protection of a qualified threat goes away as well, and it just becomes a regular threat. If you tell somebody, if I wasn't breathing, I would kick your, something along those lines. Well, as long as I keep breathing, you know what, I'm going to be alive. That's fine. And then, of course, when I stop breathing, I'm dead. It's not going to matter anyway. If I say, if I wasn't wearing a tie, well, that would mean that I would have to wear a tie for the rest of existence, because as soon as you see me without that tie, the qualification is gone, and now the qualified threat becomes a real threat. The other piece to this, don't go get up into somebody's face. Don't go get up into a police officer and do these things, because this could be misinterpreted, and that's not exactly what we're looking for. But understand, legally, you can say some of the things that you want to say, but you've got to make sure that you give the right qualification, because once that qualification goes away, what you thought was legal, and in fact what was legal to say, is not going to be legal any longer or protected anymore.